countdown is on.
First third down of the second half for Duke. Pocket collapses. Down he goes. R.J. Pearson with the sack for the Wildcats. Ball is blocked. Northwestern, the big special teams play. There's play up ticking too. Ball is out of the sack. It was bounced out. It's returned into the end zone. Hubbard on top of it. Touchdown Wildcats.
High snap, and this will walk it off. Hyman finishes it on the road, and the Cats storm the field.
It's time for 25 teams in 25 Grums.
We roll on in 25 teams in 25 Grums, and we talk about one of Nebraska's former Big Ten West rivals today with the voice of the Cats, Dave Eanet, joining us here on the Prairie Flower Casino Zone Hotline. Dave, thank you so much for taking the time. How are you today?
I'm doing great, Josh. Caleb, good to be with you guys.
We are so happy to have you on. Let's just dive right into it, Dave. Let's start with the quarterback position. It's interesting. A couple years ago, Preston Stone at SMU threw for close to 3,200 yards, had 28-6 touchdown to interception ratio. Early on last year, struggles, is benched for Kevin Jennings. Now he is at Northwestern. I mean, the question would seem to be, can he regain that 2023 form? How do you think that question is going to be answered over the course of the next few months?
Well, the initial feedback has been pretty good because he did get in there in time for the spring, and he has clearly taken the number one quarterback job. And it's interesting, guys, because Northwestern hasn't necessarily had a solid number one quarterback this far ahead of the season, really for several years. There's always been a bit of a competition. Now, they did get some guys out of the portal they had success with, and you kind of knew those guys were going to end up being the starters. But to this point, knowing that this guy is number one, there's not a competition between Preston Stone and QB2, who would have been Jack Lausch, last year's starter, but he has decided to devote his time to baseball on a full-time basis, so he's not going to play football. And this is now Preston's team. I mean, this is he's going to be the guy, and they are very excited to have him. I mean, you rattled off some of the numbers from 23, and I think that's the guy they think they've got.
Well, I know when we were at Big Ten Media Days, it felt like a surprise for a lot of us that don't follow the Northwestern program, but how much of a surprise was it that around Evanston on Lausch deciding to continue with baseball? Then obviously that makes it not so much of a competition this fall camp at the quarterback position.
Well, I think people kind of saw it coming because they saw what Stone brings and how this team at times, not necessarily through the fault of Jack Lausch, but this team struggled mightily on offense last year. And now you've got a guy with a pretty good resume coming in to play that position. And the fact that Jack played baseball in the spring, and you know, he was going back and forth between spring practice and baseball. I mean, I think almost getting on a plane after practice, going to wherever the baseball team was or the other way around. And look, it's a reason not many guys do that, right? That's very difficult. I think he did a great job with it. He had a good year in baseball. They had the baseball program is kind of tracking in the right direction now at Northwestern, and he was a big part of that this year. But he was originally a baseball player and ended up getting an opportunity to play football at Northwestern and jumped at it because he was a terrific high school quarterback. But he had his opportunities here. They tried him in different packages early in his career. Then he became the starter. And, this program needs to kind of get back to where they were a couple of years ago. And I think they feel like going into the portal, getting an established quarterback as they did is maybe the first step.
The voice of the Cats, Dave Eanet, joining us here on Unsportsmanlike Conduct. Dave, let's talk about the pieces around him. I loved the quote from David Braun in Vegas where he said, every single person on our team, when it's 4th and 1, doesn't matter where we're at on the field, should be demanding that we're going for it, trusting that behind that offensive line, we can pick up that 1 yard. I'm curious if you think, A, that offensive line can be that type of group? And then B, with some running backs back in 2025, what you're expecting overall from the run game?
Well, I think the run game is going to be really a much better area for this team. And look, they've had some guys. I mean, Cam Porter is in his 6th year, and Cam has looked terrific. But they've had some instability in the offensive line 2 years ago. It got a little better last year. But Caleb Chernin, their left tackle, is one of the highest rated offensive linemen in the Big Ten. He's huge. He's 6'7". They list him at 325. He's started a ton of football for them. And so I think they feel pretty good with him up front. And then they've got some transfers who've moved in on that offensive line. They've got some depth there, which is something David Braun was talking about yesterday. But you look at you look at Stone, you look at the running backs with Cam Porter, Joseph Hyman, Caleb Komolafe. These guys played a lot the last 2 years, and they got some young guys behind them. This potentially, and I mean, I hate to say this is going to be a sure thing, but potentially is one of the deeper running back rooms that I can remember in more than 30 years calling Northwestern football. And they've had some pretty good running backs over the years.
Oh, yeah.
Now, on staying on the offense, not the run game, but in the pass game, and that contributed as well, both run and pass, to being bottom 5 last year in points per game, yards per play. If you get that run game going, who's going to stand out in the pass game for the Wildcats?
Well, they had some guys to replace there in A.J. Henning and Bryce Kurtz, who were terrific, but both had to deal with some injuries over the course of time. They've gotten a couple of guys in the portal who I think are going to step in and make a difference. Chase Farrell, Griffin Wild. Wild's he's an exciting. These guys aren't like huge receivers by any stretch, but I think they're going to come in and make an impact pretty much early on. And one from kind of the old stomping grounds of David Braun, Griffin Wild is a South Dakota native and played at South Dakota State. He comes in from the portal. And then Chase Farrell, a guy with a lot of speed, transfer from Stanford. And I think those two guys are going to make an impact. But they have some guys returning who've dealt with injuries. Frank Covey is one. Ricky Amarazi is another. I think these are names you're going to become more familiar with. And then I think they're going to use the tight ends a lot in the passing game. And, while they've lost some guys, Thomas Gordon and Marshall Lang there, and, I think they've got a bunch of tight ends who I think are going to come in and be a big part of this passing game. They're going to spread the ball around, and I think knowing they have Stone there, he's a guy who can do it.
Voice of the Cats, Dave Eanet, joining us here. 25 teams in 25 Grums. We're talking the Northwestern Wildcats. Dave, other side of the ball, Anto Saka, I know is a player a lot of people are really excited about. Bruce Feldman, he always puts out the freaks list every single year before the season of the Athletic, and he was on that list. Like, what does that proverbial next step, what does a great season look like for him in 25?
Well, he hasn't been an every down guy up till this point, but now he gets his chance. And I know in talking to some of the coaches, they say when the NFL guys roll through, the guy they're most interested in is Anto Saka. And he's a guy that they've turned loose on third down, and he's gotten after the quarterbacks. He dealt with some injuries last year, slowed him down kind of the second half of the season. But, this guy is a force. He's put on some weight, and I think he's going to be one of the top edge guys in the Big Ten this year. And then, they have some other guys on this defensive line. They've kind of nurtured this position. Aiden Hubbard is back. He's been a playmaker for them on the outside, on the D-line. I think this should be one of the better defensive fronts in the Big Ten, and I think that's something that I think gives them a lot of comfort because, they've had different parts of their defense have been really good, and I think this line has kind of been percolating, and now I think they're at a point where they're ready to develop.
How is that back end getting rebuilt after losing some guys from the secondary, not just to graduation, but the transfer portal to including like guys going to Oregon. Like there's some pretty good guys that were in the back end, but now how is that getting reworked this year?
Well, Theron Johnson, the guy you're talking about, is transferred to Oregon. So the Cats will actually see him in their Big Ten opener up at Northwestern Medicine Field. Fred Davis is a transfer who they really like, came from Jacksonville State, and he's going to be a guy who's going to step right in. He played previously at UCF and at Clemson. And you know, they've got some guys back there who have their back half and their secondary's been pretty good the last few years, but now they've got some guys. I think that some young guys. Oria Dye is a guy who missed last season with an injury, played a couple of years ago, got hurt, but he's a guy I think they have high hopes for. And you know, it's all going to come down to how good this defensive line is and how much pressure they can put on opposing quarterbacks. But their secondary was good last year, and I think they're going to be pretty good again this year.
Dave, you mentioned Northwestern Medicine Field. I mean, this is maybe the only team that we will ever preview where like the stadium or stadiums, I guess, because you'll play at multiple spots this year, is a part of the story. I was lucky enough to be a part of the Big Ten Network crew for the opener last year in week 1. The sight lines are obviously incredible. What have you thought of that? Obviously excited for next year and what the new stadium is going to bring, but what have these couple of years been like for you?
Well, look, Josh, they had to find a place to play these couple of years. And I drove by the new stadium yesterday, and it's amazing how much progress they have made on it. In fact, they just put the first section of the canopy. There's a canopy that's going to actually cover the seats. So there will be partial protection from the elements for the fans, even though the field itself will be exposed to the skies. But it's amazing that, you know, we're a little over 12 months away from the first game there, but they've made unbelievable progress on it. And the place is going to be beautiful. It's going to be state of the art. Sight lines are going to be great. The fan amenities are going to be as good as any in college football. It's not going to be big. It's going to be 35,000, which is by design.
Yeah.
Northwestern Medicine Field, as you said, it's a really unique setting for college football. I loved it last year. They lucked out. The weather was perfect every game, but you look out and you see sailboats just really a few yards off the east sideline, basically, of the field. And they've improved some of the fan features this year and moved some seating around, but ultimately it's going to be the same experience. And I think last year they weren't necessarily in position to use it to their advantage. I think they're better prepared for that this year. It was such a new experience last year. I think guys have been used to practicing there. They got used to playing there last year. And I think it's going to be a much better home field advantage for them.
As Josh said, multiple venues to be playing at this fall. For me, Dave, there is disappointment that the Minnesota game is not at the lakefront to see PJ Fleck actually have to row a boat to the field.
That's a great point. I hadn't even thought of that. I hope you don't mind if I use that at some point. But look, Wrigley Field's not that far from the lake either, so he's got that going for him. But yeah, they'll play Michigan and Minnesota at Wrigley, and you know, I would think that'll be the last time they play at Wrigley for a while. They've been playing one game a year there anyway for the last several years, and they haven't had a lot of success there at Wrigley Field. I think that's one thing they want to get accomplished this year is finally winning a game at Wrigley, because you know, they played Illinois there in 2010, back when they had to play in one direction, and then they resumed it a few years ago, and they've had some tight games, but just hasn't quite worked out for them. So, but look, it's a great option to have if you don't have your home stadium quite ready yet, and it should be a great setting when Michigan comes in and when Minnesota comes in.
All right, Dave, we finish up every interview for these 25-team previews with a bit of a rapid-fire segment. Are you ready to go?
I'm ready.
All right, Nick, hit it.
Rapid fire.
Rapid fire.
You do not throw rocks at a man who's got a machine gun.
Rapid fire.
All right, Dave, the most important player for the Wildcats this season.
No doubt, Preston Stone.
The player that you are most excited to see how they contribute to Northwestern this year.
Anto Saka.
What is the floor expectation that would satisfy expectations?
I think getting back to a bowl game, that's the first step.
What is the thing that you really like about this year's team?
I think they've got good balance, offense, defense. I think that it's going to be more of a complementary team that maybe we've seen the last couple of years.
What is the thing that worries you most about this year's team?
Injuries, offensive line in particular.
If you had to wager $10,000 of your own money, what would your record prediction be?
$10,000 of my own money? I would say, if it's 10,000, I would say 7-5.
All right. Who plays for and wins the Big Ten Conference?
Plays for and wins the Big Ten. Well, I'm going to keep Ohio State in there. And I guess this is chalk, but I'm going Penn State.
When they play at Memorial Stadium on October 25th, what percentage chance do you give the Wildcats of coming out of Lincoln victorious?
They got a pretty good track record there, so percentage-wise, let's go 50 right now.
All right, perfect. And finally, if you had to bet on 3 teams to lift the championship trophy in late January, who would you pick?
Well, I would pick Ohio State. I would put Texas in there, and yeah, I guess I'm going to say Georgia.
Those are the 3 teams that have been picked the most throughout the last few weeks.
Yeah. Oh, well, sorry, it's not original, but...
No, I think the champ might come from that group. Dave Eanet, the voice of the Cats, joining us here. 25 teams in 25 Grums. Dave, we always appreciate the time. Enjoy the season, and safe travels to Lincoln, Nebraska in a couple of months.
Look forward to seeing you guys there.
All right, Caleb, let's get into the Northwestern schedule. As always, we put up K Ford's numbers. It is, as we just mentioned with Dave, it is going to be an interesting one because they will play at 2 stadiums throughout the year, Northwestern Medicine at Martin Stadium. That will be until the end of October. The 2 Wrigley games are November 15th and November 22nd against Michigan and Minnesota. You see what it looks like. I mean, a road game to kick things off at Tulane, a Friday night game that I will actually be at when they host Western Illinois. But look at the draw. They have Oregon, they have Penn State, they have Michigan. So they have 3 teams that are certainly playoff picks for a lot of people. Michigan may be a dark horse, USC, another dark horse. And then a team like a Nebraska, Minnesota, and Illinois. I mean, this is not the easiest of schedules for the Cats in 2025.
No, and then you look at right off the bat that you're on the road right away. That's tough. Yeah. And then, yes, you get to come home for a few, but it's Oregon. So there's nothing being kind of handed to Northwestern as they go through this transition, into a, you're getting your feet wet still with a new era and you're between stadiums. And then you look at that stretch. This is the stretch that I think would be most worrisome for Northwestern on where their season can go. And it's right after the Penn State game. They come home with Purdue and then go to Nebraska before a bye week. Are they too beat up from a game with the Nittany Lions to get at least one of the 2 between Purdue and Nebraska? That stretch to me is going to make or break whether or not they get bowl eligible. Because I know, you think they're going to beat Western Illinois, right? They should beat Louisiana Monroe. Where are these other games that they're going to try to get to bowl eligibility, or like Dave just said, get to 7 wins on the regular season?
Yeah, if you look, Caleb, at games where they have a 30% chance or worse to win, I mean, the number is very, very high. It's Tulane in the opener. Oregon is there. Penn State, of course, is there. Nebraska, USC, Michigan, Minnesota, and Illinois. K Ford has them as a 4-8 football team. Those numbers make sense. I mean, if they're going to climb above that, and Dave said 7-5, they're obviously going to have to pull it off on the road in the opener versus Tulane. Another one that I would look for them maybe to pick off if they're going to do that would be UCLA, certainly. And then, the Nebraska, Minnesota, Illinois kind of group, right? As we view all those teams kind of in the same land. So if they're going to get to 6, and certainly Dave's number of 7, that is how they are going to do so. One more thing, Caleb, before we go to break and get to some content. I liked this from Bill Connolly at the start of his preview of the Cats a few weeks ago. He says, over the last 10 years, Northwestern ranked in the defensive SP Plus top 25 7 times and went 54-33 in those seasons. In the other 3, They went 8-28. They haven't had a truly poor defense in ages, but when you haven't even had a top 80 offense since 2018, success is all on the defense. That is the thing that they have to do. They have to find ways to get the offense up and not have all the pressure on the defensive side of the ball.
Wow, that sounds really familiar. I can't believe we've never talked about a team having all of the pressure on the offensive side of the ball. But you're right, with Northwestern, it has seemed that it is swung wildly, even more than what we've seen in Lincoln. And for Northwestern to have some success on offense, that can be the difference for them in 2 to 3 wins. And it's not even can they have a top 30 offense? Can they have a top 50 offense? Just don't be bottom 5 nationally. And that should lead to a couple more wins, obviously every year a little bit different. But this schedule not aiding them at all in trying to find those extra 2 to 3 wins.